All right, Cursed here. We're looking at a Shalai and Hallar deck. Hallar, yeah, by Hey Georgie. So they're asking, they need help cutting 18 cards from their deck. They have a few rules in mind, no infinite combos, pretty budget cards, less than $1.50 per card, and staying true to the Burnish archetype as much as the Counters archetype. Try to balance the two. Let's see which cards we can cut, anything they're missing, and lands. So let's open this up and take a look. All right, Shalai and Haller. So we got Naya colors, Flying Vigilance 3/3. Whenever one or more counters are put on a creature you control, it will deal that much damage to target opponent. All right, already like this. Let's take a look. So regular +1/+1 counter stuff across the board with general kind of good stuff in the colors. Let's go up here, Cultivate, down this reach. Okay. Soul Ring, Forever. Okay, so taking a look at this. Ooh, that's a lot of lands. 38. How high is the mana cost across the board, I think? Let's take a look. Generally around 3. Virgin Woodworm. Okay. So the first thoughts I'm going to say is that um, we probably want to lower the curve a little bit. I don't want to say we should cut lands. We can probably cut a few lands. And we have ramp here. So my thought is, how important is all of this ramp? What exactly are we ramping into? Besides regular commander shenanigans where it's just seen as a necessary thing to have ramp, there's always a question of what we're trying to ramp towards and how effective that is. So our commander is 3 colors and 4 mana. So that already is a pretty good reason to be ramping. But it does immediately bring up the notion that we have 3 mana ramp, and most likely we want 2 mana ramp. Um, I would put in the 3 signets for these colors. So let's see how much we're looking at. We got Boros Signet, we got Gruul Signet, and we have Selesnya Signet. And the talismans, I don't know how expensive they are, the dual colors. So let's look at Impulse. Okay, so the talismans are probably off the table. I imagine talisman of, what's the enemy color here? Is it red, white? Yeah. Conviction should be cheap. Yeah, Conviction is cheap enough to make it in here. But I think a goal would be to be able to play Shalai and Haller on, is it Haller or Hallar? That's going to bother me. I'm going to say Hallar. Um, to play your commander out on turn 3, and we're going to need 2 mana ramp to do so. So looking at this, so depending on what you do, I think you could cut these two to get the ramp that you need at 2 mana. The signets are already really good because they fix any color into 2 other colors. So they kind of already do a bit of the thing that these 2 spells do, where they give you an extra color in addition to getting the color you want. So like Cultivate for a mountain and a forest is just as good as Gruul Signet in a lot of ways. I think something I want to think about right away is, let's start by cutting our highest mana stuff and see what we can do. So, for example, Semester's End is a particularly strong card, but I don't realistically see you holding up 4 mana and passing. And alternatively, if you are proactively casting this spell, you don't get the benefit till the end step, and you're spending your turn to do, let's say, yeah, 1 damage per blink. So I would definitely lose Semester's End here. Um, Heaven and Earth. I think you could cut Heaven and Earth. I get where it's going. This is a good board like a directional board wipe in either way. But interestingly enough, half your creatures don't have flying, so Earth is particularly bad. And Shalai and Hallar, your commander has flying, so it's particularly weak to heaven. With that in mind, I think if you want some kind of board clear effect, you would be much happier grabbing one of those three mana red spells that deals three across the board, or that 4 mana spell that deals is it 4 or 5 across the board? It's red, 4 mana, sorcerer, each creature damage, and then sorcery. Can't imagine this is too expensive. Chain reaction is very cheap, where it deals damage for each creature, so you have some control over it. But the other one I was thinking was Storm's Wrath, which is 43 cents. Yeah, I would probably play those over that because if you want a board clear, you want it to be a board clear here. If you're losing your board, you might as well be killing some creatures. And considering how quickly your creatures grow, I don't see that being too much of a problem. Once again, I know this feels weird, but I'm going to be targeting a bit more of the ramp. Wood Elves. I saw another one here. God an Ancient, was it? Hmm. Yeah, maybe let's start with Wood Elves as I look for the other one. Nice and easy to cut because though it is a target for +1/+1 counters, it is a 3 mana do nothing in your deck that is very aggressively based. But I don't want to cut all the ramps, so I don't want to be so hasty at that. Let's look at the end of the spectrum again. Emergent Woodworm is 7 mana for a 4/4 that puts three +1/+1 counters, if I remember correctly, on a creature. If that's another creature, gains the ability. Right, this is from our newest set. So the ability it gives is whenever this creature attacks, look at the top X, where X is the power, and then you can put a permanent from there into play. So this is 7 mana for 2 creatures. I think I would prefer. Is it Vastwood Hydra? We have another Hydra that has a similar ability. Let's put in Hydra. Let's say cast less. Genesis Hydra. I'm used to this art. So Genesis Hydra is pretty cheap and it is lower on the curve. It also comes with +1/+1 counters, but you have a little more control over it. Whereas this, I believe it just needs to attack, unless I'm wrong. Yeah, this is kind of tricky. I like it. So okay, let's say you're casting both for 7. Genesis Hydra will get you a permanent that's 5 or less, and Emergent Woodworm can get you something which is a creature +3. Okay, Emergent Woodworm has a much higher ceiling, but it's a lot harder to cast. I think I would personally really prefer reducing the mana curve on this. Genesis Hydra is because sometimes you're just going to get a land anyways, so Genesis Hydra is going to be easier to cast. Slurg. Slurg is cute, but a lot of mana for what it does. Um, because it doesn't. It's weird. It's not like modular if you're familiar with it, where it takes all of its counters and puts it on another. Instead, when a creature dies, if it has a +1/+1 counter, it gives one more to each creature with one, which should be every creature, but I don't know. I don't think it's particularly strong. I think I think this is easier to cut. It's too much mana. It is objectively a 6 mana 5/5. I do appreciate that it comes in as 5 damage, but 6 mana for 5 damage, and you get a subpar creature. I just think you can do a lot better with lower cast. Another backup spell when this creature, each attacking modified creature you control, create a tapped and attacking creature that's a copy of it, exile. Okay, so this I like. I like this a lot. This is an exceptionally strong card because though it's a backup, it actually affects all of your creatures. This is game winning, right? You play if you have a board at all, you cast this and you attack and get copies of all of your creatures. And if any of those creatures have ETB +1/+1 counters, oh, Genesis Hydra is already in here. Oh, I feel bad now. Well, keep Genesis Hydra. Um, yeah, on that attack, you're going to double all of your creatures basically and get a bunch of fresh counters on them for your commander to burn out. This is perfect. Hamza's fine because it gets lower in mana. Conclave Sledge Captain, 3 backups, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, put that many. See, once again, I think this is just fine. This is 6 mana to put 3 counters on something, and then if you can get through, and then if you can get through, it's going to gain a ton of counters. That's another. It gains the following abilities. I assume it gains this ability 3 times if you target the same creature 3 times. So there is a bit of cuteness where you attack with a 4/4, it hits, and then you end up with a 12/12. Um, because it's based on the damage and not the power of the creature. But that seems a lot for 6. Sunsork Regent. This feels like I'm sure you have it. Managorger Hydra. This feels like Managorger Hydra. So what's the difference? The difference is Sunscourge Regent comes in with flying instead of trample. They're both evasion. This gains you life, and it has a 4/3 body instead of a 1/1. But is that worth 2 extra mana? And I would argue probably not. At a glance, you have less white cards than your other cards, and this is adding 2 white pips. To make your mana a little easier, we can cut Sunscorched Regent, and I don't think you'd miss much. Loyal Guardian. I don't know how often we have abilities that just flat out once a turn put +1/+1 counters on a creature. I know I just said that I would cut a 5 mana white creature. I'm just looking up off of my cube in the side. There's a card, Envoy. Is it Envoy Victory? Victory's Envoy. So this says beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. I would argue if you don't want this, I'm not sure how much you want Loyal Guardian. It feels really strong, but you need your commander out in order to do that. You can guarantee the first trigger by casting this pre-combat. I don't know. I'm a little medium. I think there's an argument that can be made that on a strong board, Loyal Guardian is very, very powerful. Let's say you have 6 creatures, you play Loyal Guardian, you go to combat, and your commander gets to do 6 damage in ones to any opponent. But if you're familiar with the term win more, you're already at a great advantage at that point. If you have 6 creatures and your commander out, you should be doing really well anyways. You don't really need something like this there. Whereas like whereas Mirror Style Master turns an attack that may take out one opponent into an attack that takes out 2 opponents, Loyal Guardian for 1 or 2 triggers is just going to do a little bit of damage and increase your threats just a little bit. I don't like it as much. I think I'd rather. There's a lot of 4 to 5 mana cards in green that just add a bunch of +1/+1 tokens. Distribute counters. If I can spell it correctly. So looking at this, Biogetic Upgrade puts 3. Blessing of Frost is a snow card. Blessings of Nature is 4. Storm the Seed Core is 4. Are you playing Storm the Seed Core? No. I like these kind of cards a little more because they're a one-time thing. I recognize the strength of having it as a creature, but it does just kind of open you up to a bunch of damage. Storm the Sea Court also adds trample, and though the Guardian has trample itself, I think it's better just to have it across the board so that you have the evasion, go in, and hopefully take out a player with that one cast. Whereas Loyal Guardian, instead you cast it, you get one trigger, and then you hope for no board clears, you hope for no targeted removal. And the fact that it doesn't do anything, in fact, the fact that it's a 5 mana 4/4 with trample if you don't have your commander is pretty awful. So the more I talk about the less I like it, honestly. The rest of these seem pretty clean. Guardian Scale Road's great. Elite Scale Guard is fantastic. Constable of the Realm. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on this, exile up to one target non-land permanent until it leaves the battlefield. Okay, so it comes in. Okay, so I don't love this. The ceiling is really high on a card like this, but it doesn't do anything the turn it comes in, and you need to use another card to put counters on it. I would argue the strength of a lot of these cards is they either come with counters, or immediately benefit other cards with counters. And I think this one has to come in, and then you need another way to put counters on it. And don't get me wrong, the ceiling is high. If you have Loyal Guardian, or if you had, I don't know, a low mana way, like Inscription of Abundance, to put two counters on it immediately, that's two cards that are exiled from your opponent's battlefields. And I do really like that. But think about what if you don't? What if you don't? You have a 3/3 for 5 mana that has to hit in order to do anything. Because it has Renown 2, it's going to guarantee getting 2 permanents off the field when it hits. So your opponents are very much incentivized to not let it hit. Because either you're taking out like half their board, or if you attack opponent B, opponent C has a vested interest of not letting that through because they might lose things as well. Okay. I would say the rest of the deck is really, really strong and really straightforward. Um, I think that would be it. I think those would be the changes. The lands look fine. They're a little messy, but like you're in 3 colors and you want to hit all 3 by turn 4. So it's understandable that there's going to be some hiccups with some tap lands. Um, you should cut this. You should cut Temple of the False God. So coming back, I would think about adding a few signets, transferring these and maybe a few lands into signets, and then I would pick most of my cutting at the top end. Because I think that's where you're going to have the most problems of those cards rotting in your hand. Whereas almost everything else I see, I really like. Everything in the low end of your deck, I really, really like. So I think this is a great start to a budget commander with +1/+1 counters in mind, and with the burn sub theme. I will say really briefly, because this video is almost at 20 minutes, that I don't really feel the burn sub theme here. Like, I get what you're going for, but because so much of your burn comes through +1/+1 counters, this deck kind of defaults into a +1/+1 counter deck. So I think maybe you should, to an extent, let that aspect go and just focus on the +1/+1 counter. Because when it works, you're going to get the burn that way, and you're not going to have to worry about it as much. But otherwise, I like the deck. I think it's strong. I think it's straightforward to improve it. Uh, I'm cursed, and I hope this helped.